Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? We retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. At 3:07 on a Tuesday, the wind off the Savannah River brushed the porch, and the little tin wind chime above the steps went quiet like a held breath. Evelyn Hart had sap on her fingers from pinching a browning leaf off the young magnolia near the fence. The yard smelled like damp dirt after last night's rain. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of her house dress. "It's Marcus," said the screen. She wiped her hand on her apron and picked up. "Hello, baby. Big news. Come to the house tomorrow. Everything is about to change." His voice carried a bright layer that did not touch the center. Before she could ask, the line went dead. She stood under the magnolia with the phone at her ear until a mosquito found the soft skin on her arm. She slapped without looking and missed. Inside, the percolator on the stove clicked and hissed. The kitchen held on to heat even in October, thick with the smell of coffee and lemon oil. A wood frame on the counter held a picture of Jack in his work shirt, with his thumb hooked into the pocket, laughing at something outside the frame. She tapped the glass with one fingernail and poured coffee. The first sip was bitter and steady. Caleb called around noon. She turned the phone to speaker and set it beside the salt cellar. "You good, Mom?" he asked. His voice had the soft drawl of a man who gave people loans small enough to matter. "I am. Your brother wants me at his house tomorrow." "That for work or family?" He said big news. He sounded like he was already wearing a new suit. Caleb snorted. "Want me to drive you?" "I can ask Mrs. Crowley for a lift. You have your lunch crowd." "Mama," he said, a little hurt now, "I have time for you." "Then pick me up at 4. We will be on time, just like your father liked." "You still keeping that savings?" "Your daddy's 45,000. I let it sit like a winter onion quietly growing." He made a quiet sound. "We will be careful with all that. Promise." "Of course," she said, and put the lid back on the sugar like she was closing the subject. That evening she walked to the church for the bake sale, her white sneakers scuffing sand across cracked sidewalks. Spanish moss hung heavy from live oaks. In the fellowship hall, pecan pies steamed beside yellow cakes covered in plastic wrap. Mrs. Crowley, who lived 2 houses down and knew the comings and goings of every mailbox on the street, waved her over. "You look sharp, Evelyn," she said. "Your hair is neat today." "It was a good hair day," Evelyn said, touching the bobby pin behind her ear. She bought 1 slice of pie and wrapped it in a napkin for later. On her way out, she saw Sloane Avery Hart glide in from the side door and talk to a woman with a gold watch. Sloane's eyes skimmed past Evelyn like she was a painting that did not fit the wall. It was not rude. It was nothing. The next day, the porch board sang under Caleb's boots when he came up. He smelled like laundry soap and the penny dust of the bank. He checked the lock on the back door without comment, then took her tote and held the truck door for her. The window glass had a scratch that cut the light into thin lines. Ardsley Park spread out in clean squares and proud porches, lawns edged to the inch. Marcus's house stood tall and white with black shutters like careful eyebrows. Sloane opened the door before they knocked. Her manicure matched the soft beige of her silk blouse. "Evelyn," she said, "you look lovely." Evelyn smoothed the skirt that she had sewn 6 summers ago. "Thank you, dear." The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of eucalyptus. The floor shone like a lake at noon. The living room had a glass coffee table, and in the center of it sat a leather folder with a brass seal. A man in a navy suit stood when Evelyn walked in. "Mrs. Hart," he said. "Harold Keene, counsel for the estate of Bernard Hill." Evelyn nodded and kept both hands on her handbag. Bernard, Jack's mother's cousin. Tall at Christmas, scarfed in July, a man who smelled like menthol and money. He had eaten 2 helpings of sweet potato casserole at her table, once laughed big and said nothing real. Marcus was already standing. He held a flute of champagne and kept it at his side. His cufflinks caught the light. When he bent to kiss her cheek, his aftershave slid through the eucalyptus. "Mom," he said, smiling with all teeth. Jenna came in behind him, wind in her hair from the drive down from Atlanta. "I made it," she said, half out of breath. She hugged Evelyn with both arms. "Hi, Caleb." "Hey, sis," Caleb said, and shot a look at Marcus that did not stick anywhere. Harold cleared his throat. His voice had the rhythm of practice. He opened the leather folder and slid out a stack of paper that looked too heavy to be paper. "As you know, Mr. Bernard Hill passed last month. He left a will. He valued family." Harold looked up and then down again, reading. "The estate is estimated at $32.2 million. He directs this to be divided equally among the 3 children of his nephew, Jack Hart. That is Mr. Marcus Hart, Ms. Jenna Hart, and Mr. Caleb Hart. Silence snapped tight, then Sloane made a sound like a laugh and a breath at once. Marcus, she whispered, and did not whisper. Harold raised a finger. Additionally, Mr. Hill specified a separate gift of $1 million outside the main division for Mrs. Evelyn Hart, widow of Jack Hart, in recognition of her quiet devotion. Evelyn felt the room tip the smallest degree. She turned one step and found the arm of the couch. She did not sit. She did not cry. In her chest, the heat moved from one side to the other, slow like thick syrup. For me, she said too low, then cleared her throat. Why? Mr. Hill wrote a letter to accompany this, Harold said, and from a side pocket he produced a cream envelope with her name handwritten. He handed it to her like something alive. She cracked the seal. The paper smelled like old cedar drawers and a little like Bernard's menthol. The letter was brief. Evelyn, we met twice. You held your husband up without ask or applause. You spoke of your children with light in your eyes and no envy at all. I trust people who work and do not announce it. Take this. Spend slowly. Stay yourself. She put the letter back and folded the flap. Jenna was watching, her eyes wet. Caleb was smiling in that small way he had when he did not want to scare a good thing away. Marcus held his champagne glass tight. He had not sipped. Harold continued with words about tax and probate and timetables. Sloane wanted to open the champagne on the bar cart. The cork hit the ceiling and bounced once. Marcus flinched and smiled all at once. After the congratulations thinned, after Sloane went to show someone the new patio, Harold asked Evelyn if he could make a copy of the letter for the file. Marcus answered for her. We will handle it, he said. Harold paused. There may also be supporting documents that we should go through. We will handle it, Marcus said again, softer. Harold tipped his head. On the way out, Jenna kissed her cheek. You sure you are all right? I am steady, Evelyn said. I have been steady for years. Sloane handed her a small white box tied with ribbon. Inside was a keychain with a little gold house on it. Just a trinket, Sloane said. Evelyn put it in her bag so she did not have to answer. Caleb drove her back along the streets that rose and fell like the backs of resting whales. Live oaks mottled the truck with shade. He kept glancing at her hand on the door, at the way she pinched the spot between thumb and forefinger when she was thinking. You can stay with me tonight, he said. I want my own bed, she said. Your father's pillow is there. It still smells like his hair on the nights I'm lucky. He did not tease her for it. He pulled up to the curb and waited until she had her key in the lock. She turned to wave and saw that his mouth had bent into a brave smile. Inside the house was exactly as she left it. The percolator sat cold. The picture of Jack waited. She set her bag down and took out the letter. She read it again at the kitchen table. She felt the grain of the wood under her palm, the dry line where Jack had once set down a pan too hot and left a scar the shape of Georgia. At dusk, the front steps were damp with dew. The chime above the porch hung quiet again, thin strings tangled once around their own weight. She lifted it, untwisted the threads, and let it fall. A small sound, a bright one. Later, when the dishwater cooled and the house held more silence than noise, the phone rang. The sound cut the kitchen in half. Mom, Marcus said. The aftershave was not there now, just the tone he used at depositions. We need to talk about that money. I will come by tomorrow. I have a plan that will be good for you. The line clicked. Evelyn stood with the phone warm in her hand. Outside, a breath of wind came down the street, and the chime struck once against itself and then stopped. She turned off the kitchen light, and the house went to dark in small squares, window by window. In the black glass, she saw her own face, and behind it a shadow that looked like the shape of a man who had worked his whole life and did not ask for much. She touched the frame of his picture as she passed. In the hall, the floor gave once under her step and then held. She slept with the bedroom door open and the magnolia visible through the window like a pale hand in the night. Morning slid into the kitchen the way it always did, slanting past the blinds and drawing bars on the table. The percolator clicked to life. Evelyn rinsed the magnolia sap from her fingers and set 2 mugs down. Before the coffee had finished, a car door thudded in the drive. Marcus let himself in like he used to when he was a boy, then stopped at the threshold as if the air had changed since he was last there. Smells good, he said, glancing at the stove. You asleep early last night? I slept, she said. You want sugar? Black is fine. He set a leather briefcase on the table. The latch snapped. The sound was too loud in the small room. He took out a slim stack of documents, each in his own slick sleeve, and a fountain pen that caught the light. I have a plan for you. He spoke clear like a man who has said a speech to himself in the car. A trust. I take legal authority to manage that million so you do not have to fuss with the market or the tax code. In return, I guarantee you $3,000 a month. Every month. You can keep your routine, the rest grows. Evelyn took her mug in both hands and let the heat sit in her knuckles. Outside, the wind nudged the chime on the porch, and it tapped once against a dull pipe. I do not fuss with the market, she said. You know me. That is why you need me. I can keep it safe in the bank, the kind with the little mint at the counter. He smiled, not with his eyes. With inflation, you would lose buying power every year. It is throwing money away. I do not need much to buy. He flipped the first page toward her and put the pen beside it. The pen rolled until it rested against her saucer. Mom, these are standard instruments. I drafted them myself. I have the contacts, the advisory teams. I can move fast when opportunities come. She did not touch the paper. Caleb can point me to an advisor. Caleb works a loan desk, Marcus said. His tone kept even but lost warmth. He is a good man. This is a different scale. He knows how to count, she said. Marcus leaned back, fingers drumming once on the leather. Do you trust me? The question landed like a bag of sand. She watched his face and thought of the boy who had asked the same question when he was 12, and coming home late from the park with dirt on his knees, she set her mug down so that it did not rattle. I trust that you are my son, she said. That is a different thing than signing papers I do not understand. I am a lawyer. Understanding is my job. Let me do it for you. I need time to think. He laughed once short and dry. There is not much to think about. This is common sense. Unless someone has already gotten in your ear. No one is in my ear. Caleb is territorial. Jenna thinks branding is a plan. His words moved faster. They will tell you to keep control so they can pull strings. I am the one with the skill set. They do not pull me, she said, and heard how flat it sounded. She touched the edge of the top page and then pushed it back toward him. Marcus drew a breath and stood and gathered the document's movements sharp and neat. Call me when you are ready to be practical. He stopped at the door and looked over his shoulder. And do not sign with a stranger. People like you get scammed every day. The last word softened as if he was offering a kindness and not a warning. After he left the house felt like a shell on a beach after the wave pulls away. The chime outside knocked twice and went still. She washed the 2 mugs and wiped the table in slow circles. She thought of Jack and his rule against making big choices on an empty stomach. She made toast she did not want. Butter cooled hard on top. By mid-afternoon she called Caleb. He came in with his tie tucked in his shirt pocket and his sleeves rolled past his elbows. He sat and listened to her words without interrupting, which was the way his father had courted trust. Do not sign anything, he said. If Marcus wanted to help, he could recommend an independent advisor and step back. Total power in his hands is not help. He is my son, she said. He has always tried to be important. Maybe this is his way of holding on. She did not know what she was defending. She felt tired in the bones and also awake in a way she did not like. Caleb checked the back door again before he left. I will call Jenna, he said. She needs the whole story. 2 days of quiet passed, broken by calls from Jenna and by the sudden whisper of neighbors who pretended not to stare at Evelyn's mailbox as they walked their dogs. On Wednesday morning, the bell rang. The mail carrier asked for her signature on a digital pad. He handed her a thick envelope with a law firm logo that looked expensive just to print. She opened it at the kitchen table. The paper had a crisp bite where the blade had cut it. She read the first page. She read it again. Her vision did not blur. It sharpened like glass. She read phrases in a different voice as if someone else's throat had formed them. Petition for conservatorship on the grounds of diminished capacity. Evidence of paranoia. Age-related decline. Request for appointment of legal guardian. Marcus's name appeared where a stranger's name should be. He offered himself to hold her life. There were attached statements. One from Sloan, handsomely formatted, saying Evelyn had seemed confused during the reading of the will and unable to follow basic sums. One from Mrs. Crowley, claiming she had seen Evelyn talking to herself in the yard at odd hours. A doctor she had never met suggested remote assessment indicated risk. The kitchen felt too small. She stood and found herself holding the orange-handled pruning shears she kept on the windowsill by the sink. The grip fitted into her palm like it had been made for it. She called Caleb with a voice that did not sound like her own. Then she called Jenna. Jenna cursed into the phone in a way that would have made Jack cough. She told Evelyn the name of a lawyer in town who owed her a favor. Frank Sullivan met them in an office above a barber shop where the hall smelled of talc and hot metal. He was in his 50s with a good suit and a tie that had been tied quickly. He read the petition in one long sweep, then placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. "We will establish your capacity with independent evaluations," he said. "Neurological, psychological, geriatric. Separate practitioners, no ambiguity." He pushed a bottle of water toward her. The days that followed were a march. Offices with plastic plants, receptionists who spoke softly while tapping fast. A neurologist asked Evelyn to draw a clock and remember 3 words. She drew the clock with numbers spaced even and a little cramped the way her handwriting had always been. She said the words aloud. A psychologist asked about dates and faces and small subtraction problems. A geriatrician laid 2 fingers on her wrist and counted while watching her face. Each room smelled different and the same, antiseptic over human breath, paper over metal. In the evening, she sat at the kitchen table and let her body remember the chores it knew while her mind replayed Marcus's questions and answers. "Did you trust me? I trust that you are my son." He had not asked past that. The first hearing took place in a courtroom with cream walls and wood so dark it looked wet. The ceiling vents hummed. Jenna sat on Evelyn's left and Caleb on her right. Marcus entered with 2 lawyers and with Sloane, who wore a black dress that looked like it had never seen a wrinkle. He did not look at his mother. He stared over the heads in front of him at a point only he could see. Judge Whitaker had a shock of white hair that refused to lie flat and a pair of glasses that slipped down his nose when he looked at exhibits. He called the case by number and name. The clerk read the petition title. No one in the room coughed. Marcus's attorney spoke of statistics and best practices. He led Sloane to the stand. Her heels clicked on the wood. She lifted her hand to swear and held it steady. "Mrs. Hart," the attorney said, "how did your mother-in-law respond at the reading of the will?" "She seemed lost," Sloane said in a voice that imitated compassion. "We had to repeat amounts in simple steps. She looked overwhelmed. It broke my heart." Jenna made a small noise beside Evelyn. Evelyn kept her eyes on the back of Sloane's head. The hair was smooth as poured paint. "Have you observed other concerning behaviors?" "Repetition," Sloane said. "She tells the same story twice, confuses names. She called Marcus by his father's name at Christmas." Evelyn closed her eyes once and opened them. That had never happened. The lie sat there on polished wood, calm and sure. Mrs. Crowley testified next. She held her purse in her lap and twisted the strap as she talked. Frank stood to cross-examine. Mrs. Crowley did. "Mr. Marcus Hart give you any money in the past month?" "He helped me with a small roofing problem," she said. "He is generous that way." "How much was the help worth?" "$2,000, she said and looked at her hands. A doctor named Ramirez took the stand. He had a white coat and a neat beard. He said a remote evaluation suggested caution and further review. "Did you personally examine my client?" Frank asked. "No," the doctor said. "Did you speak to her on the phone?" "No." "Your opinion is based on third-party reports." "Yes," he said and shifted in his seat. Then it was the defense's turn. A neurologist with 30 years in practice spoke to the clarity of Evelyn's test results. A psychologist explained that her performance fell above average for her age, and that anxiety under stress did not equal delusion. The geriatrician smiled at Evelyn on the stand and said he wished his own mother was as sharp. Caleb testified. He kept his cap in his hands like a man at a funeral, even though he was not wearing one. He told the judge about his mother balancing a household on a factory wage without missing a payment, and about her keeping his father's insurance untouched because she did not spend what she did not have. Jenna testified. She talked about 3 calls a week about advice that did not sound like advice because it came wrapped in questions. She cried once and did not hide it. When Evelyn took the stand, Frank did not lead her. He asked her to tell the court what her days looked like. She spoke of coffee and the Magnolia Yard and church bake sales. She did not look at Marcus until the last sentence. When she did, his eyes were down. Judge Whitaker rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. He said he needed time to review reports and submissions. He did not dismiss the petition. He did not grant it either. He set a date for further consideration and told both sides to keep tempers. The gavel landed once. Outside, Savannah heat pressed down even in the shade of the courthouse steps. Reporters hung back and sniffed for a quote. Jenna steered Evelyn toward the truck without pausing. Caleb unlocked the door and reached to help his mother climb in. She swatted his hand away and then grabbed it anyway. At home, the light in the living room had gone soft. She saw it before her feet had crossed the threshold. The window above the sofa was open a finger's width. She did not remember leaving it like that. The frame picture of Jack on the bookshelf had slid to its edge and fallen flat on the carpet. She stepped in and picked it up. Dust streaked the glass. Jack's mouth was still open in the old laugh. She wiped the glass with the hem of her sleeve and set the frame back farther from the edge. On the porch, the air was still. The wind chime hung like a silver sentence unfinished. She lifted one of the tubes and let it go. The note that came was thin and lonely. She shut the window. She checked the back door. She locked it again, though it was already latched. In the kitchen, the smell of coffee had faded. The sink was clean. The stack of mail on the counter leaned left. She placed the court papers beneath the letter from Bernard and put a plate on top, as if weight could make law behave. She sat with her hands in her lap and listened to the house. A pipe settled in the wall. Somewhere a truck shifted gears. The magnolia outside tapped the glass with one slick leaf. The chime did not ring. The call came just after lunch. Unknown number. Evelyn let it ring once more so she could steady her breath and then pressed accept. Mrs. Hart, a woman said, "My name is Dana Park. I worked for your son for 3 years. I need to see you." Evelyn reached for the chair back. "What for, dear?" "I have something you should have. It is about the will and about how your son prepared for it." "Please, not on the phone." They met at a coffee shop on River Street where the cobblestones stayed slick long after the tide dropped. The door chimed when Evelyn entered. Dana sat at a small table near the window, shoulders narrow in a gray blazer that had not been pressed all the way. There were hollows under her eyes, and she kept one hand wrapped around a paper cup even after the coffee cooled. "Thank you for coming," Dana said. She glanced over Evelyn's shoulder as if one more step would appear there. "I do not much like coffee by the river," Evelyn said, and tried a smile. "It tastes like salt." She sat and folded her hands. Dana set a manila envelope on the table. It made a soft thud through the waxed paper tablecloth. "I was Marcus's assistant. Calendar, documents, emails. He fired me 2 months ago. He said budget. That was not true. He let me go because I asked what he was doing." Her fingers tapped the envelope once, then stopped. "I copied some things the day they told me to pack my desk. I did not know what to do with them until I saw your name in the paper. I am not brave. I am just tired of being afraid." Evelyn slid the envelope closer. Inside were printouts and a handful of notes. A dated email from 2 years earlier with Marcus's signature. The subject line read, "Executor." In the body, he asked Bernard's attorney to consider him as the most qualified family member to handle the estate. There was a paragraph that should have been harmless and was not. "My mother is well-meaning," he wrote, "but she does not have the capacity to manage complex financial matters. Any provision for her should be placed under capable oversight, for the good of all." Another email pressed harder. He suggested meeting Bernard in person to discuss how best to preserve assets and minimize exposure. He said he could keep the family aligned. He said the right executor could make sure nothing went off script. Dana placed a second stack on the table. It was a policy document with Jack Hart's name at the top. The paper smelled faintly of toner in someone else's office. Evelyn saw the date printed near the header. 3 months before Jack died. She read the section that listed the issuing agent. The name belonged to a man she recognized from a Christmas party at Marcus's house. "I am not saying what this is," Dana said, voice low. "I am saying, why would a son process a new life insurance policy for his father without telling his mother that he did it? Why would he do it right then?" Evelyn stared at the numbers until they made no sound at all. Dana took out a final bundle. Draft copies of affidavit statements. One had Sloane's name at the top, another had Mrs. Crowley's. The margins carried Dana's careful print in pencil little arrows and cross-outs. There were versions with different adjectives, as if someone had been trying on clothes to see which ones fit. "He made me shape them," Dana said. "He told me what to emphasize. He did not say lie. He said frame. I did it until my stomach hurt. When I pushed back, he said I was confused. Then he said I was out." The ceiling fan moved the smell of coffee around. Outside, a boat horn sounded and a gull answered. Evelyn placed both hands on the folder to stop the faint trembling that only she could feel. "You did not have to call me," she said. "Thank you for choosing to." Dana's mouth shook. She took a breath and held it. "Make sure someone protects me when this comes out. That is all I ask." Evelyn nodded. She slid the envelope into her tote bag the way a person lifts a baby. She stood, then sat again for a second because the world tilted a fraction. When she walked back to the truck, the cobbles did not feel friendly. Her shoes caught and then released like hands letting her pass. Frank read the emails in silence in his office above the barber shop. He took his glasses off and pinched the spot between his eyes, while the fans below hummed and a man laughed at something on daytime television. "This is enough to get the judge's attention today," he said. "This changes the posture. We will file immediately for emergency review." The hearing drew more bodies than the first. Word traveled fast when the story had blood in it. Judge Whitaker's glance was sharper. He turned the pages himself instead of handing them to his clerk. "Mr. Keene," he said to the estate lawyer, "were there any addenda or memoranda not presented at the original reading?" "Your Honor," Harold said, standing among the benches, "there were sealed instructions that were to be reviewed with the executor and the heirs together. I was told those would be scheduled." He did not look toward Marcus. He must have looked in his own mirror last night and practiced not looking. Marcus's attorney protested. He called the documents stolen by a disgruntled employee. He asked to strike them as tainted. He made his words clean around something that was not. Judge Whitaker rubbed the white line where his wedding ring had spent 30 years before his wife died. "The petition for conservatorship is dismissed," he said. He set the file on the bench. "There is credible evidence of manipulation that bears on the integrity of these proceedings. This court refers the matter for investigation. Counsel will cooperate, or counsel will find themselves walking instead of talking." The gavel hit once, the sound lifted the air. Evelyn did not feel triumph. She felt an old tiredness climb her spine and sit down between her shoulders. On the courthouse steps, Sloane stepped away from Marcus and pulled her sunglasses down, and answered a reporter's question with an arrangement of words that did not commit her to anything. Marcus stood a yard behind her and clenched and unclenched his jaw like a man with a sudden toothache he refused to admit. Caleb drove his mother home. She watched the live oaks bend toward the street, their branches bearded with moss. He walked her inside and checked the back door again, out of habit and out of real worry. She was the one who found the damage when he left to get sandwiches. The back door frame had been split near the lock. The living room looked like a wave had moved through it. A lamp lay on the rug with its shade wrinkled in a way that made it look like a crumpled hat. The glass in 3 picture frames had burst and left little points that flashed when the light reached them. It was the yard that stopped her breath. The magnolia near the fence had been ripped out of the earth and thrown on its side. Clods hung off its roots like heavy dresses. The young leaves shone dull as if someone had touched them with dirty hands. On the patio table there was a single sheet of printer paper with letters big enough to read from the steps. "This is only the beginning." Her eyes did not water. Something in her chest closed like a door. She touched the magnolia trunk with the back of her fingers and then pulled her hand back fast. The sap was cold. She called the police and then she called Caleb. 2 officers walked the rooms and took photographs. They bagged the note as if it were a small animal. They spoke gently and without promise. "Do you have anyone who might have wanted to frighten you?" the younger one asked. He tried to keep the question apologetic and failed. "My son is very angry," she said. They both looked anywhere else and then back at the same time. Caleb arrived with Laura and the kids. The children kept their shoes on and stood in the doorway like soldiers. Laura hustled them back to the car after one look. Caleb helped Evelyn pick up the overturned chairs and the books that had fallen in a soft avalanche from the shelf. He picked glass with 2 fingers and dropped it into a bowl. He told her again that she should stay with him. She shook her head and put a pillow back in place. "This is my home," she said. "Your father built that gate with his hands. He painted those baseboards twice because I did not like the first color. I'm not leaving those memories to babysit themselves." Caleb wanted to argue. He found a screwdriver and tightened the strike plate instead. He set a dining chair against the door for the night. When the house quieted and the children's voices were a memory in the hallway, Evelyn stood in the bedroom and reached for the shoebox on the top shelf of the closet. The cardboard was soft as old bread. Inside were photographs and ribbons and the pair of little brown lace-ups Marcus had worn through the toes the summer he turned 9. She ran her fingers over the raw places where his feet had pushed against the leather until they made openings. She set the shoes on the bed for a moment and looked at them the way some people look at altars. Her phone lit the room a cold blue. Sloane's name glowed on the screen. "Evelyn Sloane," said when she answered. Her voice was smooth and thinner than usual. "This has gone too far. Marcus is not himself. He needs to see you. Come to our house on Saturday at 3. No lawyers. Just the 3 of us. We will talk like a family." Evelyn listened to the ceiling fan. She felt the place in her palm where the pruning shears had pressed earlier. She could hear Caleb in her ear telling her not to go. She could hear Jack in her memory asking her to listen to her own good sense. She looked at the little recorder Frank had given her, and then at the brown shoes on the bed. "All right," she said, "Saturday at 3. She set the phone down and flipped the recorder in her hand to feel its weight. She slipped it into her purse and zipped the pocket. On the way to the kitchen, she stopped in the hall and lifted the wind chime from where its string had snapped. She held it in both hands and felt the metal cool her palms. She propped it on the table and laid the broken string beside it like a thin vein. In the bedroom, she put the small shoes back in their box. She pressed the lid down and slid the box to its place. The house settled once softly. Outside, the night felt heavy and close. The magnolia lay on its side in the yard like a fallen child. Evelyn stood at the window and watched until the glass went gray with her breath. Then she wiped the pane with the edge of her sleeve and turned off the light. Saturday carried rain in its mouth. Evelyn watched the street shine and then dull as the clouds shifted. At 2:30, she took the recorder from her purse, pressed the red dot to see the light wink, then slipped it back. She locked the back door twice. The magnolia lay dark and the wet yard roots tangled like hair. Caleb offered once more to drive. She told him no and took his umbrella anyway. The handle was warm from his hand. The truck's wipers worked a steady rhythm. Live oaks dipped and shook like old men nodding off. Sloane opened the door before Evelyn knocked. Her lipstick was the color of pale tea. The house smelled like eucalyptus again, but under it there was something new, a sour edge of sleeplessness. "Thank you for coming," Sloane said. "He is in the study." The study sat at the end of a hall where the light pooled and then thinned. The door stood open a quiet inch. Evelyn tapped it with 2 knuckles and went in. Marcus sat behind the desk in a shirt untucked at one corner, sleeves rolled to the elbow, jaw dark with stubble. He looked smaller. His eyes had a feverish shine without heat. He did not get up. "Hello, Mom," he said. "Hello, son." Rain ticked the window panes. The desk was neat except for a small pile of cufflinks, as if he had emptied his pockets and stopped midway. Evelyn sat in the chair facing him and set her purse on her lap. She felt the recorder against her palm through the fabric. Sloane came to the doorway and hovered. Marcus flicked his fingers and she stepped back. The sound of her heels softened as she moved down the hall. "I am tired," he said. "You must be tired too, too. I am." "This can end," he said. "You can sign, I can take the weight, and you can stop worrying. We do not need a judge to tell us how to be a family." Evelyn rubbed her thumb over the purse seam until the leather went warm. "You asked a judge first. You would not listen." He leaned forward. "I worked too hard to get here. I'm not going to watch years of it unravel because you decided late in life that you like control more than sense. You practiced those words," she said. "They do not fit your mouth." He let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "You think I am a villain because I want to keep what I earned. You think I like the pieces of this house that tell me I am better than the boy who taped his shoes. You wanted the shoes fixed," she said. "I did fix them. It was never enough." "That is your memory," she said. "Mine is different." He looked at his hands. The knuckles were red from where he had been cracking them. "When I was 9, I stood in line at school for picture day, and I looked down and saw my toes through the leather. I wanted to disappear. I swore the next time I stood still in front of a camera, there would be nothing to see through." She thought of the little brown lace-ups in the box. She let herself think of them and then let the thought go. "What do you want from me right now? Use the smallest words you have." "I want the money in my hands." He did not try to soften it. "I want you safe. I want Caleb and Jenna to stop acting like they are in charge. I want to be the one who decides, and if I do not." He tipped his head toward the rain. "Then we keep walking the road we are on." "You came into my kitchen and told me not to trust strangers," she said. "Then you brought strangers to tell a judge I am weak-minded. You took my neighbor to a bank and paid to fix her roof. You had a doctor I had never met put my name in his files. You pulled my life like a thread and thought I would not notice the sweater on the floor." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the shine was gone and something raw looked out. "I will not apologize for wanting to protect what is ours." She waited to see if he would hear his own sentence. He did not. "Who wrote your letter to Bernard?" she asked. "The one where you said I did not have capacity and that any provision for me should be managed by someone capable." "You were practicing that line already. You liked how it sounded." He went still in the chair. He did not ask how she knew. Outside, the rain sped up and kicked at the gutters. "He met you twice," she said. "He was kind enough to see me as I am. Twice was enough." Sloane appeared in the doorway again, eyes bright, mouth set. "Are you two finished?" It came as a statement. Marcus looked at the desk instead of at either of them. "Yes," he said, "we are finished." Evelyn stood. Her knees popped. At the door she paused. She looked back. Marcus's hands lay flat on the desk, now palms down as if he was steadying a map. She turned for the hall. "Forgive me, Mom," he said. It was barely sound. It reached her like a ripple and thinned there. She did not answer. The rain hit the house in a fresh sheet. Sloane walked her to the front and did not try to touch her. Evelyn stepped out into the smell of wet boxwood and oil. The umbrella took the first slap of rain. She thought of the recorder and did not look at it. By the time she reached home, the clouds had broken and the light had gone white and sharp. She set the umbrella to dry in the bathtub and checked the back door again out of habit. The split frame looked like a white scar against the paint. She called Caleb to say she was back. She put the recorder on the table and did not press play. Just before dark, Frank called. His voice had a charge to it that did not show itself often. "Evelyn, are you sitting down?" "I am at the table. We found the rest of Bernard's instructions. Your uncle left addenda with his personal attorney and the notary. They require the creation of a scholarship foundation in Jack's name funded with $20 million. The remaining 12 is to be split among the 3 siblings on the condition that they manage the foundation together for 5 years. If anyone refuses, that share is forfeited to the others. Your $1 million is unconditional." The room swung once and steadied. Marcus hid that. As executor, he had a duty to present everything. He did not. That is fraud. Judge Whitaker is calling an immediate hearing. The courthouse smelled of rain and old varnish. Reporters stood in a line along the wall with umbrellas dripping on the tile. Marcus came in with his lawyers and without Sloane. His suit hung on him. He had shaved too fast. A nick on his jaw bled under a piece of translucent paper. Harold Keene confirmed the documents. He kept his voice level. He did not let his eyes travel anywhere they did not need to go. The clerk marked the addenda with exhibit stickers that looked like small yellow flags. The prosecutor laid out numbers and dates. Marcus had already moved nearly $2 million from his anticipated share into properties and speculative plays. He had presented the will without the conditions that would have limited his control. He had acted as if words could be arranged to obey him. Judge Whitaker asked the questions himself. He looked like a man sanded down to his essential grain. "Mr. Hart, he said you were entrusted with your uncle's last wishes. That trust is the spine of probate. Why did you withhold the addenda?" Marcus did not answer right away. His lawyer put a hand on his forearm. Marcus did not look at the hand. He did not look at the judge. He looked at the table and then up at Evelyn. "No excuse," he said. The 2 words were quiet and clean. The judge nodded once as if he had been waiting to hear something plain. He turned to the prosecutor. The state offered a plea that included 3 years in custody, 5 years of probation, full restitution of misused funds, permanent surrender of his law license, and mandatory work with the foundation upon release if the board would have him. Marcus stood. He seemed to understand that he was taller than the moment needed him to be, so he bent at the waist a fraction and spoke toward the microphone where a recorder's green light stayed steady. "I accept," he said. "I did what you say. I hid what I did not want to be true. I tried to make the world smaller than it is so I could control it. I accept." Judge Whitaker spoke the terms and set the dates. The gavel struck. The sound was one sharp click in a room that kept its own breath steady. Marcus turned then. The deputies were patient at his shoulders. He walked down the aisle and stopped in front of Evelyn. He went down on one knee the way people do when they tie a shoe. He did not touch her. He kept his hands on his own leg. "Forgive me, Mom," he said. The words came in a voice he had not used since he was a boy. "I am ashamed." Evelyn put her palm on the top of his head where his hair had grown in a little uneven. She felt the shape of his skull through it. She did not pull him closer. She did not move away. "Stand up," she said softly. "Listen well." He nodded. The deputy touched his elbow and he rose. The cuffs clicked around his wrists. He did not resist. He did not look at the reporters. He walked toward the side door where the hall went dim. Outside, the rain had cooled the day. A bell from a church down the block rang the hour. Evelyn stood on the top step with Caleb and Jenna at her sides. The umbrellas opened. A gust lifted water into her face and then settled. She tasted metal and old pennies. She took a slow breath and let it out through her nose. At home, the house met her with its usual small sounds. The percolator clicked when she set it on the stove. She took the recorder from her purse and placed it on the table. She pressed play and listened to the quiet study of the rain at the windows. Her own voice saying words that held the shape of the day, and his voice drifting after them like a leaf on a current. "Forgive me, Mom." She stopped the recording and set her hand flat on the table. The wood was warm from the light. In the yard, the magnolia lay in the damp earth leaves twitching in a loose breeze. She pulled a chair to the back door and placed it under the knob. In the hall, her fingertips brushed the broken wind chime where it waited on the console. The metal tubes shivered against one another with the small sound of instruments warming up before a song. 18 months did not arrive as a single thing. They came in pieces. Morning light on a kitchen table, the sound of keys in a lock, paperwork, coffee gone cold. A knock at the door that belonged to no one dangerous. Marcus served time. 8 months inside a low concrete building off the highway, then a work release program where days were measured by sign and sheets and head counts. Evelyn went twice. The first visit, they held hands across a plastic table and said little. On the second, he spoke in a voice that stayed level even when his eyes did not. I am doing what the court asked. I will do the rest. You will do what is in front of you, she said. One thing then the next. When he was moved to the program, he called her every Sunday evening from a phone that made all voices sound flat. She took the calls in the hallway with the wind chime hung silent on the console, the broken string still tied in a loose knot around the top tube. The Jack Hart Scholars Foundation fit into a 2-room office over a consignment store on Abercorn at first. The paint smelled new and sharp. Someone left a plant on the windowsill that would not live more than a week. A brass plaque went up beside the door and caught the afternoon sun for an hour each day. Caleb set up the books and learned the software with a patience that made the old computer hum like it was grateful. Jenna moved from Atlanta with boxes that said kitchen in a handwriting that had never labeled a pan in its life. Evelyn sat at a small desk and learned to answer emails with careful sentences and no extra words. They argued about everything that mattered. Who qualified? How much to cover? Whether lunches were part of education. They landed together more often than not. A guidance counselor from Groves High called to say she had a student who needed a champion. The first scholarship check went out in a white envelope with the foundation's logo printed too big. Evelyn sealed it with a thumb pressed along the flap and felt something old loosen in her chest. The calls for speaking came without asking. Church basements, school libraries, a Rotary Club in a carpeted room that smelled faintly of shrimp. Evelyn told what she knew and did not add shine. She did not say her son's name unless someone else did. She noticed that people held their breath at the word mother and exhaled at the word work. After one talk, a woman with a soft scarf gripped Evelyn's hands and said her daughter had not called in 3 years. They stood together by a bulletin board until the woman's fingers uncurled. Sloan filed for divorce with papers that moved on their own. Evelyn read the notice and put it under a plate on the counter with the rest of the legal weight. She did not call Sloan. She did not need to hear a woman explain a decision that had already happened. She did wash the small gift keychain with the house charm and set it in the back of a drawer instead of throwing it away. Marcus came home late in winter. He stepped out of a state van and stood on the curb under a clear sky that looked like glass. Evelyn and Jenna and Caleb were there in coats, standing in a small V. The deputy signed a paper and went back into the van without a word. Marcus looked thinner. His hair had grown in uneven. He hugged his brother and sister first. He reached for his mother and then stopped 3 inches short. She closed the distance. In the truck on the way home, he watched live oaks float past, with their dark skirts of moss, and kept one hand on his knee to keep it still. He started at the foundation the next week. No title, no desk. He moved boxes, swept floors, learned the names of donors who signed small checks with shaky hands. When no one was looking, he lifted the corner of the plaque by the door and ran a cloth behind it where dust had gathered. He did mail runs that smelled like paper and rain and young glue. He stayed off the phones until he could be trusted to tread lightly. The kids found him. A boy named Miguel, with a backpack too big for his frame and laces tied in knots, too tight to unknot, sat beside Marcus at a table and showed him a drawing of a house with a porch and a picket fence that did not know where to end. For my mom, Miguel said. Big enough so her bedroom has 2 windows. 2 is a good number, Marcus said. Air moves better that way. Miguel looked at the scuffed tips of his shoes. I'm going to be a lawyer. I will make money and I will buy it. Marcus stared at the shoes. The leather had turned soft at the toes. He looked away and then back. Let us start with this week's homework, he said. One thing, then the next. They sat together on Thursday afternoons after that. Miguel brought math. Marcus forgot to check the clock when the minutes went thin. He walked home past a shoe repair shop where a single boot stood in the window like an altar, and he stopped once and went in and asked the man behind the counter for a price. it would take to put a patch on a spot that had already failed. The man told him. Marcus pushed a 20 through the slot and told him the name of no customer and said he would be back tomorrow with a pair that belonged to someone important. Evelyn was at the office when he came in with the shoes in a paper bag. He held the bag like it was full of glass. She watched him set it on the chair and tuck the handles closed. She was careful how she watched him. He was careful how he stood. In March, the foundation outgrew its rooms. They moved into a modest space near the river with a conference table that had seen better days and would see plenty more. The city issued a permit for a small sign. Caleb found chairs on a surplus site and drove a borrowed van to pick them up. Jenna painted a wall a color that looked like morning. Evelyn brought the wind chime from home and hung it inside the door where the air could touch it each time the building exhaled. The first annual gathering took place in a high school auditorium that had seen cheer rallies and graduations and once a choir that sang so loud the ceiling felt taller. Caleb set up folding chairs along the back. Jenna checked a list and then checked it again. Evelyn held her notes in a folder and then tucked the folder away and decided to speak like she did at the kitchen table. The students sat in clusters on the left and held their breath for their own names. The parents sat on the right with hands on laps and eyes forward. A teacher cried and laughed at once when the third scholarship was called. They asked Marcus to speak at the end. He shook his head. They asked again. He pressed his thumb along the seam of his pocket and walked up the steps. He stood behind the wooden lectern with the school's name carved into it and spoke in a voice set low enough to make people lean in. My father went to work at the shipyard every day until one day he did not come home, he said. My mother sewed other people's hems on a kitchen table and kept a house from coming apart. I thought money would save me. It did not. Today I'm here to say that when your name is called, it is because you are ready to do work that matters to you and also to someone you have not met yet. That is what this is for. It was not elegant. It did not need to be. The students listened with a stillness that made the room kind. When he stepped down, he did not look to see who clapped. He set the microphone back in its stand with both hands and returned to the edge of the stage where Evelyn sat. He touched her shoulder as if to check whether she was solid and then took his seat. Spring cooled at night. In the yard, the magnolia hole held water after rain. Caleb and Marcus came on a Saturday with a new tree and a bag of soil that claimed it would feed roots. They set the tree in the ground together. Caleb held it steady while Marcus shoveled earth in a sound that fell thick and clean. Evelyn knelt with twine and a stake and tied it so the trunk would not list. Sap sticky on her fingers, she pressed the soil with both hands and felt it give. Jack would say to water slow, she said. Marcus lifted the hose and let the water run with no hurry. It darkened the soil. It ran over his shoes. He did not step back. He wiped his hands on his jeans and then took the broken wind chime from the console inside and brought it out without being asked. He sat on the top step with his head bent and threaded a new cord through the small holes. His fingers moved careful and sure. He tied the knot and pulled it tight and hung the chime under the porch beam. The first sound was small and clear. On Sundays they ate at Evelyn's, fried chicken or beans and rice or stew that had sat on the stove until it knew what it wanted to be. Jenna brought bread even when no one asked. Caleb's kids chased each other through the hall until they were told to stop, and then they walked, and the still made the pictures on the wall lean. Marcus arrived early and stayed late and took the trash out without being told. Sometimes silence laid itself on the table for a minute, and no one tried to move it. It moved on its own when someone reached for salt. Evelyn kept a notebook by her bed. At night, she wrote in a hand that made ovals out of every letter that could be an oval. She did not write what she thought about the past. She wrote what had happened that day. Miguel had ink on his fingers and left fingerprints on a worksheet. The wind chime made a sound like silver when the back door opened. Caleb found a penny under the porch from a jar that had broken years ago. In late summer, the magnolia took hold. New leaves unfurled lighter than the old ones and a little translucent when light passed through. A bloom opened that did not look like the others had. It curled from the center as if the air was teaching it how to be a flower. Evelyn stood at the window with her coffee and watched it expand in the heat, the petals going from stiff to soft in a few hours. She went outside and cupped one in her palm. It was cool for a second and then warm to her touch. The scholarship class doubled. The office moved one more time not far. The plaque came down and went back up in a hallway that smelled like paint and dust and somebody's lunch. Someone donated a better coffee maker, and it took 2 tries to figure out the filter. The wind chime kept its corner by the door and offered a bright note whenever the air shifted. One evening, Evelyn sat on the back steps, while the sun settled behind the neighbor's roof and left gold threads on the edges of the leaves. Marcus walked out with 2 plates, one with a piece of pie and one with a piece already missing where someone had tested it for quality. He handed her the untested one. They ate in easy silence. A car rolled by slow with a radio playing a song too old to be on the radio. The magnolia leaves caught the sound and held it for breath before letting it go. "You kept the shoes," he said, not looking at her. "In a box," she said. "I thought about throwing them away once. I am glad you did not." He nodded. He set his plate on the step and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. The wind shifted. The chime lifted and let out a run of notes that sounded like a handful of nickels poured onto a wooden table. Evelyn closed her eyes and listened. When she opened them, the bloom on the magnolia had opened another inch. She did not notice the exact moment when it happened. She only noticed that it had. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.